continuing in our learning of the laws of Shema in the Mishnah Berurah. We are in Siman Ayin Aleph. We are in chapter 71. And today we're going to talk about more people who have exemptions from the Shema. We talked about that last week in our class, discussing who is exempt from the Shema. And today we're going to talk about people who are exempt because of their involvement in a burial procedure. So we're going to talk about the mourner themselves and those who are bringing the person for burial. Okay, also known as the sukim b'meis is what it says over here. But there are people who are involved in carrying the actual body itself. So we'll get into all these things. If someone has a family member who has passed away, this is in Shulchan Aruch or in 1:1, you have to mourn for them, even if you aren't the one who's actually burying them. You still are exempt from the Shema. Okay, so you have to, when there's an obligation to mourn, there's an exemption from the Shema. There's also an exemption from reciting Shemona Esrei. And even if you decided you wanted to accept upon yourself, says the Shulchan Aruch, and do these mitzvahs, you do not have permission to do that. And if you have someone who is going to engage in the other needs of the burial, and then you wish to be stringent upon yourself, one cannot force you to stop, basically. It would be a process of what's known as a macha, which would be to protest or to basically tell you to not do it. And these laws are discussed in more detail in Yeridea 341, where the main laws of Avelos are discussed. So who are the people obligated to mourn? So you have to mourn for the 7 following relatives: one's father, the mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, and wife. Now, what was the case that the Shulchan Aruch was talking about, the Mishnah Berurah is going to explain, is that even if you're not responsibility to bury them. So he says, for example, if you have a married sister, her husband is the one who has to bury her. So you're still exempt. And if you recite the Shema, Mishnah Berurah explains, you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. Okay, and so if you do this before the burial takes place, then you have to recite it again. So that's what we mean by exempt. It means that there is no mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to bury them right now. So if the burial takes place at 8 a.m. and you recite Shema at 7:45 while you're waiting to bury them, you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. And then at 8:05 a.m. when you're done burying them, you can recite the Shema. You have to repeat the Shema. Okay, and not only are you exempt from the Shemona Esrei, says the Mishnah Berurah, he says you're exempt from all types of blessings on food, all types of mitzvahs in the Torah. Now, if you want to eat bread, even though you're not allowed to say the blessing of hamotzi on that, and you won't bench afterwards, you should still wash your hands without saying the blessing. Okay. Now, if there is a Chayra Kadisha, explains the Mishnah Berurah, and they carry out the body to the cemetery, and then they give it to this group, and they're going to do the burial. The moment that they deliver the body to the Chayra Kadisha, they have fulfilled their obligation, and this is even before they have even left the place where the body was currently resting before it was going to be interred. Okay, so one thing the Mishnah points out is that it's not a nice custom to do where the people who sing the dirges, that they wait to recite their prayers until after the burial is done. As soon as they have handed over the body to the Chayra Kadisha, they are basically, and they've already paid for the entire needs of the burial. So they are now obligated to pray. So, you know, the thing is that he says that sometimes, things drag out a little bit, then you want to make sure you say good eulogies for them. So if you're doing that, then technically you would be exempt. But as soon as that's done, you have to then engage in davening. Okay, and he says that the completion of the burial is that they have to begin to put the earth upon the casket itself, or in the case of in Israel, they put the dirt upon the body. They don't require a casket in many places in Israel. Okay, and then the avo can leave, and they can, and because the Chaver Kadisha is engaged in it. So then the Mishna asks the question: what if this is dragging on until almost the very end of the Zman of Kriya Shema? Okay. And if you say all of the whole prayer service, you're going to miss the time of Kriya Shema. Well, then you recite the Shema without the blessings, and then repeat the rest of it as you would. In similar cases, we've had other cases of ones. We talked about that a couple chapters ago. And something else is that, now let's say the burial process drags out until the first 4 hours of the day, so you've passed the time of Kriya Shema. So he says that you are actually exempt to repeat them. You don't have to repeat them now. And so some people disagree with that, and therefore we're lenient to say that you don't have to repeat the blessings, but that certain other blessings you should say. So certain, like the Berurah Shachar, one could say. You could say those. However, you wouldn't put on tefillin, which we're not going to get into now because it's discussion. And if you want to look it up, it's in 38.5 because you were exempt from putting them on at the time, but you would put them on later when you're reciting the blessings of the Shema. Okay. So, however, we learned earlier that in that same in 58.6 that when the time passes, that you wouldn't have to say them, but now there's still, it seems that there was an ones in this case that we were compelled against your ability to do it. So you could still recite Psuki de Zimra now and still recite the blessings of the Shema. Okay. Let's move on past. There's a lot to do here. Now, in the case of the end of the Shulchan Aruch over here, where he said that, and if you want to be strict with yourself, and you have all the burial needs taken, so this is in a case of where he doesn't have somebody who is actually going to finish every single need of the departed, or it's in every case that it's every case, doesn't matter what it is, but we restricted you from reciting prayers in order for the dignity of the departed to be honored first. That they should say that people shouldn't say that, oh, the prayer is more important than the departed. No, I want you to know that the departed is the most important thing to take care of. Okay, and let's see. So if you do the opposite of saying you can't complain about it, the Mishna explains. So when we're saying is that you're going to be strict upon yourself and you have other people to take care of it, then you can't complain. And however, the minhag nowadays, Mishna says, is explained by the Marshal, is that you're not allowed to be strict on yourself. And the Mishna explains also that we said to look at Hilchos Avelos. We also say over there that you also don't have permission to be strict. The only case there is an exception is if it's a son for his father, if he was going to go to shul to say Kaddish, that would be the exception. Okay, let's look at Halacha 2 over here. Okay, when we talk about these exemptions from Shema, that's only if the person departed on a weekday, and you could bury them right now. But on Shabbos, you are obligated for all mitzvahs all day long until the end. Okay, and if you wait to bury them, and the body is at the very edge of the boundary of Shabbos, meaning if you didn't have an eruv to tell you where you were going, or the the cemetery is outside the edges of the city, which would put you beyond a Sabbath boundary. So nowadays, a lot of cemeteries are inside the city lines, but back then the cemeteries were outside the city lines. So it would be a problem to leave the city on Shabbos because you only can go 2,000 almost at the edge. And you need to immediately after Shabbos be engaged in burying this person. And so in that case, if you're waiting at the edge of the city to go to the cemetery, then you would be bound at that time. But if you weren't super ready towards the end of Shabbos, then at night you would recite the Shema in the evening, and then you could go ahead and deal with the burial itself. And on Yom Tov Rishon, says the Shulchan Aruch, if you want to bury the person that day via hiring non-Jews, then the rule follows the same rule as during the weekday, which is you would be exempt. And if you don't wish to hire non-Jews, then the rule would be it's like Shabbos. So here's an interesting set of halachas over here. Okay. So if the same thing that so he says over here that you're obligated in all the brachos and all the mitzvos, okay, except for certain things that are only conducted privately for mourning. You have to observe those, but we're not getting to we're going to take too long to explain all the laws of mourning over here. But we're talking about the Shema specifically. So if you go to wait at the edge of the city, or the Mishna explains that where you have people who are in charge of the burial, and they have to go ahead and dig the grave site. These are so too. If you get these people ready for you, then as soon as it becomes dark, then you would be exempt at that point. However, if you're not waiting to the end, we were just saying that the rule would be like on Shabbos. So the Mishnah Berurah brings down an opinion of the Torah Zahav that says that since at that moment at the end of Shabbos the mitzvah of Kriya Shema comes first, then it comes before the mitzvah of burial, and so that's why you would recite the Shema at that time. Okay, and it's only if you're going to pray with the Shema with the rest of the congregation. Okay, and also it might even be while it was still a little bit of daylight. Okay, so not completely dark. Now, technically speaking, when it means a little bit of daylight, technically speaking, the mitzvah of Shema is actually, we'll learn in a little while that, we'll learn in a little while, the time of Shema is actually a few minutes before the time that Shabbos is actually over. And so that's why you would be able to do it. Okay? However, if it's actually still daylight, you shouldn't recite the Shema, according to many other opinions. And then after Shabbos, it would mean that you could eat without reciting Havdalah, and also don't say the Shemona Esrei until after you finish the burial. Okay, and at that point, then you can say Havdalah as well, and you even have until the third day to recite that. So, and when we say in other cases over here, such as if Yom Tov Rishon, if you want to hire non-Jews, your rules follow the rules of the weekday. Nonetheless, you're going to have that following, even if you don't act on it. But if you can't find non-Jews, that's when this case would actually apply. And so, for example, he quotes the Chachmas Adam here. Mishna Berurah does that if you have somebody who passes away in the morning at the time of the Shemona Esrei, and you have people who are going to take care of the departed person, and you know you're not going to be able to reach them until after Shemona Esrei is done, then since it's Yom Tov, then your obligations don't start until after that is over. and you would have to daven first and then go deal with it, because it becomes another case of ones, a case of something beyond your control. And so too, at the end of Yom Tov, and even if that's the end of Yom Tov Sheni outside the land of Israel, second day of Yom Tov, most people say that you should say Kiddush and pray and do all these things because people aren't doing burials anymore at night in most other places. So the only thing you can't do are certain things that you can't practice in private, such as learning Torah. Okay, so if you have any issues like this during the weekday, however, it's a little bit different, because during a weekday, if the Chaver Kadisha is having a problem getting their members together, you're still going to be obligated to start as an onain, and then you are exempted from Shema and from prayer. So it's slightly different, but it's similar in that sense, because it's similar in that it's an ones, and that's against beyond your control. Law 3 over here is someone who is watching the body, even if it's not his own dead person, he is exempt from Shema, because you are osek b'mitzvah, okay? And you have to make sure to keep the body safe from anything. And you can't even be strict on yourself, okay? And there's more about that in Siman Lamed in 38 for that. If there's two people watching, this is law 4 in the Shulchan Aruch, so then they can take turns. One davens, one watches, the other one davens, the other one watches. Law 5 here in the Shulchan Aruch, the one who is digging the grave is exempt. Okay, and that's even if you're taking a break from digging, or you're going to try to get somebody else to do it. So, but nonetheless, you are still considered engaged in the mitzvah. If you have 2 or more in Law 6, 2 or more people digging, so whoever is needed for digging right now, they are exempt, okay? And if there's more people who are gathering by, tell them to go recite the Shema and then come back, and then you can switch them out, okay? And then you can switch out back and forth. And these laws are also discussed in Yoreh De'ah in 365, okay? So that's this way the mitzvah is not left unattended to, and everyone can also go ahead and get their mitzvah of Shema. Last halacha for this section. One is not allowed to recite the Shema within 4 amos of the deceased, which is somewhere between, usually about 6 feet or so. Some people make it a little shorter, 5.5 feet. Neither can you recite it in the cemetery. And if you recite it, you have not fulfilled your obligation. Okay, so this is a little bit interesting. Okay, and the reason why you can't recite the Shema there is not because of osek mitzvah, but it's because of another thing known as, the Mishna explains, loeg larash. So you're not allowed to do things in the cemetery that would make make the departed people who reside there now feel bad about the fact they are dead and cannot perform mitzvahs anymore. So you're not allowed to do things. So, for example, we learned in Hilchos Tzitzis that you can't wear your tzitzis in the cemetery, in the Beis HaKavos, because the departed will see them. And some people say that's not because you're wearing them; it's because they would hang on the ground and drag over the grave. So that's where it's a problem. Otherwise, to wear them would be okay. Some people say no; they should be tucked in as well. So it just depends on which opinion you want to follow, and be strict to follow that opinion. Okay, so you also can't recite, the non-encounter not recite the Shema, you can't recite Kaddish, and you can't say other things there. Okay, however, if it's part of the ceremony, that's when you can recite the Kaddish prayer, other prayers like that. Okay, and also there's also a prohibition on walking into the cemetery while wearing your tefillin. And if you look in Siman 45, and in the Mishnah Berurah number 1, in that case, he talks similarly about that as well. So when we say over here lo yatsa, when we say over here that you have not fulfilled the obligation, what's made? What is made to say? We just said it's not because of we said it's another consideration of loeg larash, that you're not allowed to insult the dead people. You're not allowed to insult the departed. Okay, so then the Mishnah Berurah explains this was a penalty. It was an enactment to penalize those who do that. For one who goes ahead and violates their laws, even if it was by accident. Okay, so however, now the Mishna brings down that there's this opinion that's brought straight out is just the opinion of Maimonides, the Rambam, but the Ravid himself, the great Ravid himself, disagrees and he says, nope, you do not have to recite it again. Why? Because one will be allowed in this place to recite it, and since the only prohibition is loeg larash, the insult done to the departed, therefore, if it's an oopsie, if you did it by accident, you are fulfilling your obligation. And so therefore, we say that one should be cautious about the Rambam's opinion, quoted here in the Shulchan Aruch, to repeat it again. But if you have already recited it, then if you already recited the blessings, or recited the Shemona Esrei, which also has blessings, you should not repeat it again, because that is repeating God's name vainlessly, according to the Ravid. And so, therefore, with these things, people say not to repeat it. Now, the Pri Megadim is not sure if he should repeat the blessings of Kriya Shema, and the Mishnah Berurah says one can go ahead and see in the Pri Megadim for his reason. The reasoning is the Pri Megadim in general has a he goes back and forth about these situations where one is told in certain situations not to repeat, or not to say blessings in certain places, and he quotes that there is a machlokas between the Maggid Mishnah and the Hagos Ammonios, and two commentaries on Maimonides' work, and it seems to imply that in situations where you were told not to do something and you went ahead and did it anyway, even in those situations, while it's not nice to have done it, it does not mean that the rabbis necessarily follow through on that penalty. So he says that since it continues to be, and it's not, you won't find this in the Mishnah Berurah, so again, he says since this is a penalty, you won't find this being repeated. Soon enough, we'll learn about in a couple of chapters. We'll learn about reciting Shema in places where you are told not to recite it because of inappropriate things that are in your area, and even there's a machlokas. So here too, if there's where it's just loeg larash, the same disagreement would apply. It won't require you to repeat the blessings of Shema. Thank you for coming out today. We will pick up with more of the laws of Shema next week. Thank you for coming out, and enjoy the rest of the day.